Hello all and welcome. The topic of this upcoming discussion is on the Owens Kadakia Learning Cluster Design Model, or OKLCD for short. Lisa Owens, one of the co-creators of this model, will be joining us for the duration of this topic. In the first episode, we will hear from Lisa on how the OKLCD model came to be and what went into that process. Stay tuned to learn more. Hello, Lisa. Thank you for taking the time to talk about the OKLCD model. Now, I know you and Crystal Kadakia published a book on this titled Designing for Modern Learning Beyond ADDIE and SAM. Now, when did research for this begin and what lit the fuse to even begin diving into this?
Thank you for that question, Dario, and thank you for having me on the podcast. The research actually began in 2015 when ATD, Association for Talent Development, contacted Crystal Kadakia and said, hey, we would like you to create a workshop on how to design training for modern learners. And they figured she'd be a great person for this because she had just finished publishing the book Millennial Myth. And she's a millennial herself, and she's an instructional designer who used to work at Procter & Gamble. So she got into it and she asked me to join her in that process. Well, as we started getting into it, we realized that no one really had a definition of modern learner. Most people thought that they were just millennials, but what we discovered is modern learners goes well beyond just millennials. A modern learner is really a person who is in a fast changing environment, who needs to learn something quickly and will use any resource at their fingertips in order to learn to get the job done. That's a modern learner. So that's what kicked it all off.
I've come to notice that that applies more to the environment and the age that we're living in as opposed to the person itself. So I think that fits perfectly well with that. Wow. Did you intend to develop a new model when you started this project, or how did that initially come about?
Well, the intent was to create a workshop, but with any workshop, I find it very helpful to have a visual framework to guide the learners, to help them follow us through from start to finish of the course. And we actually created a two-step process to guide us through that course. But within the first workshop that we taught, we quickly realized that we needed to change that and did so on the fly, creating a five-step process. And as we went along, learning more and more from our users and from our own research as we continued, it evolved to a five-step model with much more depth, and instead of being linear, became non-linear. So the intent wasn't to create a model. There's lots of models out there, but we found that our users were actually taking our visual framework back into the workplace and using it to guide their work. So, hey, let's jump on the bandwagon here and let's use this model to help drive thinking across the industry.
Wow, that's that's very interesting how it just ballooned into this over time, gradually as the process continued to develop. Now, with developing the model later, what went into that process? I know you just spoke a little bit about that on how it naturally came about when some of the participants in those workshops were taking this imagery of the framework back to their places. I believe initially this all started in 2015, and from what I read, the book was published in 2020. So there's 5 years of development and research in there. So what went into that process a little bit later down the line as it was later refined?
Well, one of the things we did is we did our research on the giants in the industry and coupled their experiences with ours. So you'll find that the model may not seem like it's totally unique. It's not, but does it codify a new strategy for how we can develop modern learning in today's digital age? That's what we were after. So we did it based on our original research, but then evolved it based on additional research as we continued our studies of this topic and based on what we were learning from our participants. Now, we've always, from the very beginning, been keeping in touch with our participants to find out how are they using it in the field? How is modern evolving? Because modern evolves every day. Modern's different every day. So we wanted to keep up with them, and we learned from them and evolved our model as we went. Now, what was interesting when we went to write the book, we took a pause and said, all right, let's capture all the learning we've had for the last 4 or 5 years and relook at the model and see what needs to be enhanced. We were so fortunate that our class, when we went to teach that, had somebody in there who was great with graphics. Tanasha Clinton was working with us as a participant and offered to help us create the graphic that would indicate a general flow, but a non-linear feel to it. And she's the one who actually created the graphic that we now have as our model. So again, the model came about based on original research, standing on the shoulders of giants, listening to our participants as they applied it in the workforce, and continuing to research what's coming down the road. Now, what we are looking for is stories from people like you and your listeners as they use the model and apply it, so we can further evolve the model for the next edition of the book, which we look forward to in a couple of years. So we are looking forward to your listeners' stories as well.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing how the OKLCD model came about and what went into that process. In our next episode, we'll hear from Lisa on what the principles behind the Learning Cluster Design Model are, as well as some reception it's gained in the corporate and learning and development world. Until next time.